Oh, for one, let me teach you a valuable lesson that my kids taught me. Oh, really? And what's that, you old beast? You should always watch out for Ligma. What's Ligma? Ligma, boy! What's up, guys? All here, and here we are to do a breakdown and review of chapter 399 of Boku no Hero Academia, which is known as Organic Mingling Clusters of Light. And this chapter finally has some certain things that I've been waiting for. Shoutouts to Kohei Horikoshi for being super duper efficient right before chapter 400. Bro is indubitably chefing it up in the kitchen right now. But let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. Editing me. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. What's up, guys? I got the pencil. Ooh, what's up, guys? I got the pencil here. In fact, I have it on me and I keep it on me at all times. Yeah, this is a napkin. Gotta stay clean. But regardless, let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. So, we do get to see that calamity and chaos is still in fact going down in the mystical magical world of My Hero Academia. Essentially, All For One is kind of losing it. Like, you can definitely argue for the longest time, and like a lot of people argue this, and I even agree, that All For One was never necessarily sane. Like, you don't wake up one day with a power that could help heal the world and be like, you know what? I don't want to be a comic book villain and literally dedicate your entire 200 plus year lifespan to being a comic book villain and be like normal, sane, a regular human being. Like, obviously, All For One's a bit crazy, but it's usually masked by his calmness, his air of control, the exaggerated swagger of a quirk-fueled individual. Like, he usually has that, but finally, we see with his youth coming in, with the object of his ultimate desires living and breathing in front of him in a whole hunk of metal. Like, obviously, if any time is the time for All For One to lose his good mind, it would in fact be right here and right now. And we see that All For One is leveling the entire area. We got a nice little callback to the area where All Might and Izuku met, but that area pretty much immediately got annihilated by All For One. And we see that, unfortunately, All Might's realizing that, oh no, he's actually waking up a little bit, and he's not having fun anymore, because he says, "These should boost my speed and mobility for tighter turns. He must be getting bored of the one-sided struggle." So, All Might's realizing that All For One's kind of turning on the gas a little bit. Like, before you could definitely argue All For One was trying to hold back to kind of savor the moment. Like, in his mind, All Might really is just an old relic, a mummy walking around in a mech suit, when he's literally a deity. So obviously he never necessarily considered All Might any sort of threat, but now that he has fully acknowledged that All Might's plan is planning, he is in fact getting younger, he is burning a whole bunch of lifespan, taking up a whole bunch of time, and healing more and more and more, he's finally just like, forget this, I'm gonna while out a little bit. And we see that All Might is ultimately using the final bits of his students that he can in order to try and escape and stall All For One even more. Tentacle, which is Shoji, plus Froppy suction pads. A nice callback to Froppy. I wasn't actually thinking she'd get anything because I wasn't sure how. I didn't know how David was going to incorporate the tongue, but this is a good way to use it, using the suction pads. And then using Shoto for, seemingly enough, a blaster cannon. And I really don't like him. What's his name? Ojiro? I don't like Ojiro. I don't know why. I've always had a bias against him, but considering he's never in the narrative, I've never had an active time to, like, explain that I don't like him, but considering this is a reference to him, I don't like him. I really don't like him. He's whack. But we do get to see that this is the combination of everything. I think almost every single student's gotten a reference. Has Mineta gotten a reference? I think Mineta hasn't. But I think we saw Uraraka last chapter. We saw Ida. Ida's mentioned here, too. Well, actually, no, he's not mentioned here, but he was mentioned last chapter. We got Shoji, we got Rikido, did we get Hagakure? I don't think so. There hasn't really been a stealth mode implemented yet, but we kind of get Hagakure later on in this chapter through, like, actual Hagakure. We got Ashido. I think we got Bakugo. Did we? I'm not sure. There are a couple of students that may have been left out, but the fact that Horikoshi was able to implement this many of the students at all into a battle this chaotic, this important, and this deadly is super duper impressive. I give credit to the man. Do I still fundamentally disagree with the entire concept of this battle even occurring? Yes. Do I care that much? Not as much. Like, once again, this is me turning off, like, this is dumb, this is stupid. Actually, no, it's not me turning that off. It's me fully accepting this and just I'll take the dub. All right? All Might getting to be cool in his final moments instead of just going out like a punk. I'll take it. Does it make sense? Not really. Does it absolutely devalue the power of quirks and the insanity that they are? Just a teeny tiny bit. But, all right, you win some, you lose some. If All Might has to get this crazy dramatic final battle or final run, if you want to call it that, let him have it, I guess. I mean, once again, I always feel bad about complaining about this, but I feel like this contradicts All Might's journey. Like, All Might's journey was not this. But I guess if he wins here, even if it is by a double KO, like All For One rewinds out of existence as his hand is through All Might's chest, and All Might succeeds in helping Midoriya, and he turns into the spirit realm and all that, I guess it does work out. But I don't know. Maybe I just don't understand All Might's journey. Once My Hero Academia is over, I'm planning to do like a full proper retrospective on it, very similar to Ocean's and Ian Waffle's retrospective that they're doing in their podcast discussions over the multiple arcs. I plan to do that, but like the entire series, I'm waiting for the series to end before I go back and do that. So maybe I'll get a reimagining of All Might's arc, but if you had to ask me before this fight started, did I think this is where All Might's journey was going? No. It seemed like it was walking as far away from this route as possible, but it is happening now, so I can't really ignore it. But we do get to see. He's trying to escape All For One, but All For One, he may be a little bit lost in the sauce. Assuming repeated massive damage to the body shortens his lifespan. I know just the job. Or no, I can't read, I swear. I know just the quirk to get the job done at once. The problem is the power source. Playing this by the book won't be all too effective. Lend me a hand, huh, Anima? So, this is the Coda reference. Nice enough. And that's interesting. Once again, I feel... I do agree. Notably, I will give this a pass that All Might is able to do what All Might does and have this assumption here, because it is pretty well established that All For One isn't actually that durable. Like, despite the youth coming with more explosive power, it doesn't actually come with any more durability. We saw that. It's mentioned repeatedly. So I'll take that. But it still feels so... It feels off, but at the same time, once again, like I said before, I gotta let it rock. We get to see that I'm guessing what he uses Anima for here is to find that power source, or at least to set it up for him, because the birds don't actually, like, stay anywhere near All Might. They fly off separately, but All For One manages to find All Might hiding in an alley. And he even says, cackling like a mad fool 1 minute and scampering and hiding the next. What are you, you ultimate hypocrite? And we see, as he comes down from the heavens, All Might... This is the realest face he's made throughout this entire fight. Just sheer like, oh Lord, he coming. And we do get to see that All For One is just like, your goal here is no mystery to me. And I don't need to waste excess strength to twist that garish grin into an agonized grimace. So, one thing I will admit, I think Hori heard my complaint. Yes, specifically Hori himself. I have a direct link to the man. I speak to him every week. I'm telling him not to do these things, but he ends up doing them anyway. I think he did hear my complaint. All For One does look much, much younger in this chapter. Like, consistently, too. Once again, I think the main issue was the broadness of the chin. Like, I know there are youth out there that have, like... Can I make that reference? I won't make that reference. Who do have that really, really blocky, beefy chin. I know it's not a thing that just magically develops when you're an adult, but considering this is supposed to be younger, All For One, the more pointed jaw really works a lot to sell that. The wider, bigger eyes work a lot to sell that. The fluffy hair. Like, I think it's coming together, and Hori's getting more and more used to drawing young. Like, even here, when he looks a little bit older, it's still the slimness of the jawline, the pointedness of it. Like, consistently throughout the chapter, he looks a whole lot younger. And I think that's chef's kiss. Hori, I'm not sure if his editor told him that. I'm not sure if I told him that. I'm not sure who told him that. Or if it's literally just Hori getting more and more comfortable and remembering the fact that this is young All For One. You can even see it in his musculature. Yeah, he is still ripped. Like, He's more in shape than I'll ever be. But still, he's a lot skinnier. He's a lot lankier. He's not a big, beefy Chad cake. No. He is still what essentially looks like a 15-year-old. He looks like the same age as the rest of the kids. And we see that he mocks All Might and saying, Power Saver mode is plenty enough for taking your life. And he tries to, but fails. Once again, I do get it. That's the thing. The reason All for One, in my opinion, doesn't work fully as this, even though I understand the narrative reasoning why he's like this, is because All for One was such a mastermind. He was such a plotter. Like, if you go back and reread a lot of early My Hero Academia, All for One is methodical, even to the point where he's locked up. Like, as much as I don't like the fact that he freed himself through using Shigaraki and taking him over, everything feels so appropriate, so practical, so methodical. And I get it, he's younger. He's lost in the sauce. He has the object of his desires directly thrown at him and essentially begging to get executed. But you would think, since he himself knows that All Might can still be got back to, that he knows that at any moment, right now, considering we don't see Aries time-tricity, whatever energy that Eri releases, we don't see it coursing around his body right now. Hori specifically takes it away for this chapter. Not for this chapter, but like, look for a majority of it. He doesn't actually like have it around him. You can see he doesn't have it here. He doesn't have it here. Like, Hori toned down a lot on the electrical effects here, which is fine by me. I'm not complaining. It's just something that I noticed. That's still like an active part of the plot. It's still why All Might's fighting the way he's fighting. And with that being the case, it seems like the All for One I knew would be smarter than this. He knows that I can come back and get you. You're going to come. And in fact, he should know that All Might's probably going to chase him regardless. All Might, if anything, would come to the battlefield with Shigaraki and Midoriya chasing All for One if All for One just ignored him. Because remember, the goal of All for One getting to Shigaraki is not to help Shigaraki, it's to take Shigaraki over. To give All for One that young, new, strapping vessel. And thusly, I feel like he should know better. The All for One I knew earlier in the narrative, as late as, realistically, I say earlier in the narrative, as late as Villain Hunt. The All for One I knew would be smarter than this. He would straight up, he would bait All Might to come there, and then he would execute All Might in front of Midoriya to break Midoriya's resolve, possess Shigaraki, use Shigaraki's hatred to get a off-guard, traumatized, crazy Midoriya in order to get One for All easier. The All for One I knew would do that because it's the more optimal play. But he's younger, he's lost in the sauce, he's clearly not thinking straight, and that's why he goes into using these insane abilities. And I really like this one. I'm not sure how he does it, because you see he drags his fingers across the metal. Once again, a casual display of his raw power. He's literally dragging fingers through what seems like either solid concrete or legit solid metal, and all these different spears erupt outward. And note, that is the ability he's shown before. I forget what it's called. It does have a name. But the dark bolts that he uses to hijack and take control of somebody, it seems very similar to these, except these are less jagged. These are much more straight lines, which is very, very interesting. That could just be because his power is solidifying and concentrating more, or it could be that Hori forgot these things are supposed to be like, or it's a different quirk. Maybe it's just a different quirk, because you don't necessarily see it come out of his finger. Actually, no. Oop, I read that wrong. He's not. Take back what I said. He's not actually dragging his fingers through this. He's simply piercing them with the jagged nature of this quirk. So this is just the quirk. He's straightening them out, though, in comparison to the consistent jaggedness that they usually have. And we see that All Might just barely manages to weave and then flies on out of there. And unfortunately for him, All for One has these things? Like, I don't, like, imagine, like, here's the thing, with these things, I imagine when you're like a 5-year-old in kindergarten, these things, like, they pop out, and people are like, oh, cool, you have lightning fingers, or dark lightning fingers. But can you imagine being in kindergarten, and you see your child, or a child, pop out with this? Like, I get it, it's because it's All for One, so it's jacked up to 11, but should it be? Is that how that works? I'm not sure if that's how that works. Because notably, the only reason the quirks within One for All get more powerful is because One for All literally stockpiles power. Should All for One's quirks get stronger? I guess. You can make quirks stronger through training. But like, does the base power of somebody matter when it comes to taking a quirk? Essentially, I just find it weird. Like, imagine you see a 5-year-old pop up and they release these veiny, fleshy meat puppets at you. Like, I'd be just a teeny tiny bit terrified. And we see that All Might's like, oh, how dare you? You trick me. You, All for One, notorious liar and schemer, lied to me? How dare you? But obviously, we see All Might goes to avoid these things, considering these things are monsters as well. But All for One actually straight up admits, he's like, no, I really am conserving my power. Which could be a bluff. Obviously, once again, All for One is a notorious and serial liar and manipulator and gaslighter. But at the same time, considering the raw power he should have access to, maybe he isn't fibbing right now. Maybe this is him just holding back. Considering these things aren't even as big as Dark Shadow was. And like, these aren't massive light beams. These are just flesh constructs that he's making. And he's likely, once again, not entirely used to his full power yet. Like, imagine if, say, in anything you did, you were to suddenly get a massive increase in power. Like, normally we don't get a solid multiplier for how much stronger young All Might or young All for One is in comparison to old All for One, but it is a message, it is a narrative thing that he is consistently getting stronger. Imagine if you just kept outstripping yourself every second. Like, you just got more and more and more powerful every second. Sure, you 5 minutes later, after you started getting more and more powerful every single second, likely is stronger than where you started, but you don't know what the limits of your strength is now. Like, you don't know the upper limits. If you can bench 225 in 1 minute, and then you can bench 350 in the next 5 minutes, you don't know if 350 is actually your limit. You may actually still be accidentally holding back because you're under the assumption that, oh, well, I just did 225. There's no way I can go higher than 350. So maybe All for One is indirectly telling the truth here when he says, I really am conserving my power. But we get to see that with this power conservation, it's still enough for All Might to avoid with, I believe what's left is like, actually no, the 33% is what he had before he called the rest of the Hercules card to him. So he's likely up to at least over 50% and is able to avoid a lot of these things. Once again, I'll just chalk it up to All Might having insane reaction speed. Like, this is impressive. Obviously, the technology can give you the ability to do certain things, but like, you need to have the reaction speed to know how to wield that technology. Like, did All Might train in this thing? How does he know it so well? Like, this is very, very impressive for him. And we see he dashes away. And All for One, once again, a man who loves to break you, not just physically, but also mentally, questions All Might. Now, where'd that lovely smile go? You're nothing but a bag of bones missing half his guts. Like, he is having the time of his life tormenting All Might. Because essentially, he is a man restored to his prime. Beyond his prime, realistically. Quite literally, because he like skipped over his prime and is now a kid again. But all he sees is what All Might truly is. He is nothing but a bag of bones missing half of his stomach. And sure, he's wearing a suit to hide that. He's wearing a piece of armor to disguise the fact that he is nowhere near the man he used to be. But it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, one of these is actually organically one of the strongest creatures to ever exist. The other is a man playing pretend, hiding behind the abilities, and not even the abilities, but the knockoffs of abilities that he could never hope to use because he gave his abilities up. Like, it's true. It's weird. As he says, an old fool providing hospice care for himself with shoddy simulacrums of children's powers. It's true. Like it doesn't matter how cool it is to us as readers or us outside the nerd or even people in verse who are watching this. Because remember, this is being live streamed. All Might is kind of just playing pretend. Like, he's playing dress up. And sure, it's super crazy powerful dress up, but it's still just dress up. And you can see and I'll admit, this is a nice way for Hori to remind you how powerful real quirks are. These quirks just tear through it. That armor, that facade, the reality tears through the falsehood and just breaks it all apart. And we see that All for One reminds All Might, smile, you're still on camera. The whole world's watching, remember? They'll see the symbol of peace falling to his doom as the symbol of impotence. And it's true. If All Might, like, notably, I don't think it necessarily matters to any of the major combatants. Like, Midoriya and Shigaraki do not care about what's happening right now. Currently, I'm not sure how much time has passed, but remember, this battle does take place before the Toga Twices have started to disappear. And obviously, we know that resolves fine enough. We know the Dabi conflict resolves fine enough. We know the Shoji conflict resolves fine enough. Like, all the other major battles don't necessarily matter. The only battle that this could have major impact on, that does determine the fate of the entire world, is Shigaraki versus Midoriya. But Midoriya is not watching this. So, thusly, the world's reaction is sad, but it doesn't actually matter that much. Like, as long as no one tells Midoriya that All Might's been reduced to a bag of bones inside a bag of metal with his guts missing, that doesn't really matter. But still, it matters to All Might. Once again, he, as we saw in, not last chapter, I believe the chapter before, we saw how much All Might viewed himself as that symbol, how it was his goal from early on in life. He wanted to be the shield to protect others. And ultimately, him losing that live on camera, with the world watching with bated breath, seeing him fall again, not only, and to be fair, he won the last fall, but first the facade was peeled back. All Might was not an invincible symbol, but at least he survived. At least he won. Seeing All Might perish would break millions. If not, I mean, billions is kind of hard because I'm not sure how many people are alive in the 70s. How many people are alive? I'm not sure how many people are alive within the My Hero Academia world, but just saying it's the same as us. We're nearly at 8 billion, if not at 8 billion, I do believe. But billions of people likely are tuning in. This is probably like being streamed everywhere live. Seeing this pinnacle of heroism perish, it'd be massive for the world, but hopefully, as long as it doesn't reach Midoriya, the world could still be saved. But we do get to see an All for One as he chases All Might, the running man with these tendrils. He, in one of my favorite moments, tears out through a wall. I'm not sure if this is a quirk or him simply just diving through it, but regardless, I love the look of mania on his face. He says, "Their guiding light is about to be snuffed out." And he just buries his fist into All Might's side. Impressive that All Might lived this. Like, Golly G. Willikers throws undeniably a beefcake, despite being literally a bag of bones. But gosh, look at this. Look at once again, I'm sorry. I know y'all probably get sick and tired of me saying it. Well, Hori's art is so good, bro. What is this? How does this man create things like, bruh? Look at this. Look at the detail. Look at the individual stone fragments that break off and shatter into the foreground, overlapping the panel itself, as All for One buries his fist right into All Might's side. Oh, it's beautiful. Look at the madness captured. The blank eyes, the twisted grin. Everything is gorgeous. Even the detail in the armor is immaculate. Whew. I don't know how Hori and his team do it, bro. Like, I don't know. On a weekly basis, like, I respect the Record of Ragnarok mangaka. I'd even confidently say the Record of Ragnarok mangaka. At their peaks, I'd have to give it to the Record of Ragnarok mangaka, because even side characters get such immaculate detail and designs. But the Record of Ragnarok mangaka does it in a month, over the period of a month. And they don't get me wrong, they have to produce upwards of 50 pages a month. It used to be 80, but they've been truncating it down a bit to like 50, 40s. But still, even if Hori takes a break every other week, the fact that he does this even close to a weekly basis is insane. He could have 1 million assistants, and this would still be unbelievably impressive. And we see All Might, he coughs out a whole bunch of junk. It's not looking good. And notably, the powerlessness of All Might is being shown here once again. You cannot even see the flame that he is guarding. It's there. It's likely still there. It's cupped in his hands. But he is left out alone in the storm. No one's coming to save All Might. No one's coming to help him, because no one can. But even still, to show the power of this man, broken, beaten, and abused, he still fights back. And he says, "You still don't get it. Good buddy. Lights tend to flicker on and off. So while my light might be snuffed out, someone's sure to pick up my torch and shine on. And when that radiance meets darkness, there is no need for light. So, we see he just plows over. This is one of the funniest images Hori's ever drawn. Just, can you imagine? He gets tangled up in the metal and just gets a whole meat. I think it literally pierces through it. Like, I'm not sure if this is supposed to mean that he's piercing straight through All For One, but it looks like it. And you see he mocks All For One, even in this moment, even as he's being torn apart, even as he's just barely withstanding the storm, barely protecting that flickering flame. We cut to someone who hasn't gotten a reference yet. Two people who haven't got a reference yet. And we cut back to something that I thought Hori was just going to ignore. Like, no, I wouldn't even have blamed him. Like, in terms of trying to wrap up the series as soon as possible, Aoyama's still pretty irrelevant. Like, I don't care that he's a traitor. He's still kind of random. But we see that this man from so long ago says, there is no need for light. About 300 meters northeast of the ground zero for the divide and conquer operation, 32 heroes were tasked with mopping up the villains who weren't warped away. All but one of those heroes were wiped out, which is a lie, but still, we do get to see that this was taken care of by one man. And as Yuga Aoyama breathes heavy, the dark seeds sprouting from him himself, Kunieda? I'm not sure how to say their name. I'm going to call him Kunieda. Kunieda says, for you see, my seedlings only require flesh to thrive. The roots. So, once again, in a similar vein to what I mentioned before, dog, how do you discover this? Who did, like, remember, this guy, before he became a Tartarus escapee, mass slaughterer, corpse collector, like, before he became all that, how did he figure that out? Did he just accidentally, notably, I'm not sure about y'all, but it's always something, I'll even pass this down to my kids when I have them, but I was told when I was younger, don't eat the seeds, especially not of any sort of fruit or anything like that, because it'll grow inside you. Like, that's something that I was always told when I was younger. I know it's not true. You have stomach acid. But, like, even still, we were told that, we believed it, we got scared, we listened. But how did Kunieda figure that out? Did someone accidentally eat one of his seedlings and then they started to grow? Like, how does this quirk get discovered? I have no idea. Maybe they can grow in, like, non-human flesh. It's just that he uses it on humans. Maybe it can grow in animal flesh, and he figured it out that way. But we see that the reason that this works so effectively is because every single hero that was stationed there essentially got hard countered by these individuals. And we see that even Fat Gum in all his girth says, the roots dig down all slow-like, so my fat absorption can't do a thing. Because remember, the main reason Fat Gum was so good was because he could take a lot of force and neutralize it, stockpile it. But since the roots are progressive after presumably they're lodged into somebody, just grow slowly. He has nothing to realistically absorb. There's no shock for the fat absorption to absorb, and thusly all that energy just gets turned into fuel for the flower. And we see that Fat Gum in his last moments, I don't think this is actually the end of any of them. Maybe it is. Maybe this is just, maybe every single hero did end up just getting got. But I think they'll probably be saved. I don't think Hori's going to go down that route. But in his last words, he says, show him what you're made of, Aoyama. Aoyama watches as Fat Gum gets turned into a flower. And we see that Kunieda's even impressed. He says, wow, I do believe this is the largest flower on record. After just one bloom, the spreading pollen allowed them all to propagate like a daisy chain, if you get what I mean. I've heard the concept daisy chain before. I don't exactly get it. I'm assuming that's just how daisies repopulate. But they are variable extensions of myself via their roots. That's gotta be weird. Like, that's just gotta be weird. I have no idea how that must feel. But all these different individuals are now turned. Obviously, we don't know all the different heroes that were here. We just get Fat Gum getting his own unique flower design, but all these people have been fully turned into flowers. If they can be returned to this, I don't know. I'm intrigued. But we see that Kunieda says, you've got no hope of escape, traitor. Without your belt, your power freely leaks out, leaving you unable to aim Your desperate straining only feeds the plant. Reminds me a lot of Hanami's ability. If you remember JJK Season 1, the Goodwill event, Hanami's cursed buds, they grew based on how much cursed energy you had. And the more and more you fought back, the more and more cursed energy you tried to use to fight them off, it would just slurp them off. So it's likely that these plants grow off the energy contained within people. And the more frantic that energy tries to get used up by the body, it goes into the flower instead. And thusly, the desperate straining only feeds the plant. But we do get to see that Kunita is technically correct. These things don't actually do much in terms of fighting off alone. But yeah, Kunita's right. Like, unfortunately, without that belt, Aoyama's pretty useless on his own. And we see, he says, imagine that. Hoping to fit in, you became his pawn and accepted a power that was ill-suited for your physiology. To put it bluntly, you led a pathetic, shameful life. And he's right. Aoyama's whack. I don't feel bad. I don't know. I'm just saying, even though I get it, he was put in a rough situation and his parents did it for him, I just can't. I can't sympathize with bro. I really can't. I really cannot sympathize with bro. He is kind of just stuck out of luck. And we see that ultimately, Aoyama even thinks back to it himself. That the kid shouldn't have forgiven him. Because I wouldn't have. But no, he thinks back to when he first got the naval laser in his belt. And he says, and he thinks of his family saying, oh, Yuga, how wonderful. How wonderful that he can be normal. And we see that Yuga says, hence why I said mercy. And I'm not sure if he actually said that, because even Kunita's like, did he really say that? But we do get to see that Aoyama thinks back, reminding myself of how shamefully I lived is what spurred me on to follow in the wake of the light they bring. It has given me the desire to shine deep down within my core. And we see the flowers grow more as he exerts more and more energy, but the light within burns brighter. And he fires off. And we see, naturally, he misses a whole bunch of different beams. And Kunita's like, chasing after which is beyond your sight has led you to an equally shameful... Yeah, Hagakure. Can I show this? We'll risk it. We're gonna gamble. We'll see how this gamble pays off. But yep, Hagakure comes in the clutch. And All Might declares, let there be light in the darkness. And as the flowers push forward, Aoyama grins as he's backed up by the person who just... And I'll admit, I like this too. Who saves him in this moment? Who helps him beat this man who has taken the lives of so many? It's the person who discovered that he was the traitor in the first place. It was the person who ended up revealing his truth and allowed Aoyama to walk down the path of redemption. And we see that he says, All Might says, that he will be there. He will allow the light in the darkness to shine so that he might twinkle as well. And the birds of Anima bring forth the power. As Hagakure comes in and tells Aoyama that he took long enough being that hero, ultimately, she reflects the light and burns Kunita to a crisp. And almost burns Aoyama himself, which is hilarious. But she mainly hits Kunita, which is good. She reflected all the light and sent it back. And then we get to see that a similar case happens as the bird seemingly went and got the darn car and brings down and fires. So I'm not here to lose, All for One. And you see, this is honestly the most wistful we've ever seen All for One. He looks up, actually seemingly kind of impressed. He says, know this name as you burn away. Can't stop twinkling. Bada bing, bada boom. All for One gets lit up. Interesting though, I wonder if All Might himself gets hit here. I can't tell. But as he laughs, the laser comes down and burns everything away. And bada bing, bada boom. That's the end of the chapter. If the chapter's worthy, I rip the napkin. Napkin's ripped, chapter's worthy. W chapter. Overall, once again, putting aside all my lingering issues that I have with this entire encounter, putting all that aside, this chapter is neat. We get to see more and more of All For One's quirks being used in interesting ways with his new power. We get more art consistency with All For One cooking in his young state, which is really, really cool. We get to see All Might tying in not only a reference to his students, but his students themselves being allowed to cook in this way. Two of the most undersold and underused characters in the narrative getting their moment to shine against an opponent like Kunaida. We get a Fat Gum reference, and Fat Gum's always a W. Overall, this is an insanely good chapter. Honestly, in my opinion, once again, putting aside all my previous issues, a solid 10 out of 10. I really, really like it. However, that's what I think. Please let what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure the notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below where you can join for as low as $1 a month. You things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Now, thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Dago the Napkin, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members, Recliner Plays and Red Wolf 4765. I'd like to give a very big thank you to our $5 patrons, Sean Gray, Red Wolf 4765, Midnight Gemlord, Kevin, Demix LND, and Artgoon. I'd like to give another super big thank you to our $10 patrons, Robbie Uchiha, Joaquin, and Idemokami. And a final very big thank you to our $25 member, Alex Ice Rose.